In 1967, after completing a mission, the Soviet spacecraft Soyuz 1, with cosmonaut Vladimir Komarov aboard, tragically crashes upon landing on Earth. Years later, under the leadership of a Swedish billionaire named Meyer, a mission to Mars is being prepared. After 10 months, the crew of the spaceship Ulysses finally arrives at the Red Planet. The captain informs the crew that they've been given permission to land and instructs the ship's AI, Irene, to check everything needed for a smooth landing. Meyer reveals that he spent 4 years preparing for this journey and nearly exhausted his fortune on it. However, the American company Zillion beat them to Mars by landing 2 weeks earlier. The troubling part is that Earth hasn't heard from the American crew except for a single video message warning others not to come to Mars. A heated argument erupts among the crew, but the captain insists that they will land anyway. The team disperses to their rooms, and with just 30 minutes until landing, AI Irene begins final preparations. Suddenly, an unexpected problem arises. The ship fails to detach from the carrier system, endangering everyone on board. So the only option is to manually separate the spacecrafts. The commander ventures outside the ship to release the attachments, but is flung into open space as the shuttle enters Mars' atmosphere. Meanwhile, the ship nearly crashes due to a power outage caused by a system error, leaving the crew to rely on manual controls for landing. Irene enters sleep mode, and despite the challenges, the astronauts manage to land on Mars. They succeed, but their fuel is nearly depleted, and Irene restarts. Without the onboard computer and life support system, they have only 24 hours left to survive. Alessandra grieves for her late husband when she sees a figure in a spacesuit outside the window. Upon checking the ship, it becomes clear that too much fuel was used during the landing, and now the ship cannot return to orbit. Their only hope is to wait for the solar panels to recharge the generators, but a storm on the surface will delay this for 2 days, time they don't have. Simon mentions the American ship Zeta 1, which likely crashed 2 weeks earlier, but may have left behind usable batteries. So the crew sends a rover to find the wreckage while those on the ship try to restart the system. Engineer Basil remembers that Irene has an energy-saving mode and attempts a reboot, but the AI still doesn't come back online. Meanwhile, the rover discovers the wreckage of the American spacecraft and one remaining solar panel, but there's no sign of the American crew. So as they prepare to return, the astronauts find an unconscious person in a spacesuit. Despite low oxygen levels, Jana insists on bringing the person back to the ship. Upon returning, the team also recovers the black box from the American spacecraft, but Yam refuses to open the ship's doors, stating that 4 survivors are better than 8 dead bodies. Alessandra tries to convince him, and just as the rescued astronaut wakes up, AI Irene suddenly activates and opens the doors. He claims to be carrying out orders from the USSR government, but doesn't know how he ended up on Mars. Komarov's answers are consistent with his time, raising suspicion that he might be suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. So the astronauts send a message to Earth, and the American company Zillion responds, confirming that no Russians were part of their mission. The crew of Ulysses is puzzled. How could Komarov, who died in 1967, be on Mars decades later? So is he a time traveler or something else entirely? The crew's psychologist is assigned to question Komarov, and he admits he's hungry. Yana brings him food, and during their conversation, she tells him that he was declared dead 50 years ago, and his family held a funeral for him. Surprisingly, Komarov takes this information calmly. Although the ship is stabilized, it remains unreliable, with the engine still non-functional and no fuel for a return journey. The crew continues to monitor Komarov, but he seems calm until he suddenly vanishes. A search of the ship yields no results, and it's discovered that his spacesuit is missing. A portion of the crew follows a heat trail tracked by Irene, led by Simon, so the crew of a spaceship begins to wonder if the strange discoveries they've encountered are either inspired by human civilization or borrowed from extraterrestrial sources. So as they continue to ponder whether they'll be able to return home, they notice the landing of Goldstein's second ship. To the ship's captain, Gemma makes contact and promises to help them return to Earth. However, Meyer, one of the crew members, doesn't trust Goldstein and suggests that they hide Komarov from their competitors. Jana brings Komarov a uniform to help him blend in when visitors arrive, and Komarov asks for their trust. Jana invites Vladimir into her cabin and asks for permission to use hypnosis on him, but he agrees, and she begins her work while the rest of the crew listens to their conversation through a transmission. However, Komarov only shares the final moments he experienced on the Soyuz spacecraft before it was destroyed. During this time, Gemma and Alan arrive on the ship, apologize for the soldiers' behavior, and express their readiness to help fix the ship's malfunctions. Jana recalls her conversation with Komarov, where he laments humanity's irresponsible actions and the negative impact on Earth. It is then revealed that Meyer, the billionaire, didn't plan this mission just for exploration. 4 years earlier, a rover sent a photo from Mars showing a stele, and Meyer admits that they found a stone with unknown DNA. Gemma explains that this stone is an information storage system that can be rewritten. Upon hearing this, the AI named Irene suddenly activates and deciphers a message from the stone, revealing a series of numbers. At this point, Yan Then, another crew member leads a mutiny. He doesn't trust Meyer, who warned them about Zillion, yet now the Americans have come to help. So Yan feels betrayed, especially after learning that Meyer concealed the real purpose of the mission, while Yan is ready to side with Goldstein, who is willing to go to any lengths to cure his terminal illness. So later, engineer Basil tells Meyer that Komarov is similar to the stone. They found a kind of living program. The most shocking discovery is that Basil has decoded a copy of the black box from Zeta-1, showing that the oxygen on the ship was cut off when one of the Americans struck Komarov, meaning Komarov was there. Komarov also activated the AI, Irene, when he boarded their ship. After this revelation, Meyer shows Jana some photos they received 4 years ago from Mars. When decrypted, the photos revealed Jana's face, which is why Meyer brought her on this mission. Jana feels betrayed, realizing that Meyer used her for his own agenda. Suddenly, Jana finds herself in a vision of her father's house, where Komarov tells her that she is the connection between Mars and Earth. He has been waiting for her for thousands of years and now prepares her for a difficult decision, providing her with coordinates on Mars. Meanwhile, back on Earth, scientists tell Goldstein that Komarov is like a computer and a biological machine. They are prepared to transfer Komarov's brain into a robotic body, but can't guarantee his personality will survive the process. Goldstein, desperate to cure his illness, is willing to take any risk. At the same time, Jana leaves the ship, ignoring Simon's protests. Technicians Alan and Alessandra inspect the engine and find that access to it is blocked. Irene, the AI, suddenly starts responding with jokes, which is very unusual for her. It's revealed that she has reprogrammed herself, and her logic and interface are evolving. Engineer Basil realizes that Irene's system is becoming more like a human brain. Irene admits that she's evolving. Jana discovers a small stone pyramid, and Simon forces Gemma to help him search for her. Jan notices their absence and contacts Simon, who orders him not to let anyone inside. At that moment, American soldiers arrive again and demand Komarov. Yan is ready to let them in, but the rest of the crew refuses. Meyer asks Basil to send a message to Goldstein, hoping he will be more reasonable than his military team. Despite Irene blocking communication with Earth, the engineer realizes they will need to take extreme measures. However, Jan still opens the doors, allowing the military personnel to enter. Basil begins rebooting Irene just as the Americans find Komarov, but then the lights go out and the astronaut disappears. So meanwhile, Jana stumbles and falls down a hill. She regains consciousness only to find her leg trapped between rocks, unable to free herself. At the same time, the furious military officer demands answers about Komarov's whereabouts. When? So he starts beating the crew, insisting they summon the captain. Desperate, Xena screams, wondering if her fate is to die in a pit on Mars. But then Simon and Gemma find her, rescuing her from her predicament. Alandra notices a storm approaching while the military officer prepares to abandon the Ulysses ship, leaving the others in danger. Suddenly, the lights flash and Komarov reappears, asking to be taken back to Earth. Simon, Gemma, and Jana follow Komarov's directions and discover an entrance to an underground bunker similar to the Petrum. So the psychologist senses where they need to go and leads the group. Soon they find water, but that isn't what Komarov wanted to show them. Meanwhile, on Earth, Goldstein tells a nurse a story about Mars exploration. He mentions how people were searching for little green men, but the truth is much simpler. Goldstein compares Komarov to Hachiko, the loyal dog, explaining that Komarov was created 100,000 years ago and left on Mars to wait for his owner ever since. Back on Mars, the astronauts find a wall made of human bones, realizing they aren't the first humans here. If it's not Earthlings colonizing Mars, the Martians came to Earth after depleting their planet's resources. Tragedy unfolds on the Ulysses spaceship when Jan, in a fit of cowardice, grabs a gun and shoots Komarov to ensure his own escape back to Earth. Jana collapses in agony and Gemma flees. Alexandra tries to help Komarov while Simon assists Jana. However, Komarov dies and Jana stops breathing too. Simon, discovering the presence of breathable air inside the cave, removes his helmet and revives Jana with artificial respiration, bringing her back to consciousness. As Gemma approaches the Ulysses ship, she is informed of Komarov's death and the impending storm. Meanwhile, Meyer secretly ventures off in search of his crew since the Americans refuse to take the billionaire's team back to Earth. Jana, now recovering, notices a light in the bunker and leads Simon to it. When they emerge, they see a figure in a spacesuit standing before them. It's Komarov. So Meyer catches up with Simon and Jana and is shocked to see Komarov alive. Komarov tells them that everything ended long ago and reveals that they are at the North Pole of Mars. He explains that Mars was once inhabited by a species that went extinct because they lost their way, and that species was humans. A group of survivors settled in this place, but ultimately turned on each other when their resources ran out, so the rest of them fled back to Earth, and these survivors were what Plato referred to as the Atlanteans. Komarov continues, saying he waited for thousands of years for Jana, who embodies traits of both humans and Martian AI, as she is the only one who can save humanity from itself. Now she must decide if humanity deserves a second chance. Their conversation is abruptly cut off by the military officer who plans to take the psychologist back to Earth. So the American soldier points his weapon at the cosmonauts, but Jana pleads with Komarov for help. Suddenly, the military officer starts gasping for air and collapses. Back on the ship, Simon orders the crew to prepare for departure. Meanwhile, Gemma, aboard the Zeta-2 ship, tries to reach her team but gets no response. She decides to fly back to Earth alone. The Ulysses crew attempts to contact her, informing her of the deaths of the military personnel, but she remains remains silent. Meyer starts talking, recalling their past relationship, and admits that he's just as ruthless as Goldstein, willing to do anything to make sure his name is remembered, even if it means betraying his team. However, he insists that Gemma is not like that, and she won't be able to live with herself if she abandons people in need. Just as Meyer speaks, Gemma's voice finally comes through, urging them to hurry. Goldstein learns that Gemma plans to take the Ulysses crew back to Earth and blocks the control panel of the Zeta 2 ship to prevent takeoff. Subscribe for popcorn. We are racing towards 1,000 subscribers.